A series of murders shocks a nation. A killer is on the loose, targeting young couples in Northern California, and he's taunting the police with cryptic clues. But even after all this time, he still hasn't been caught. This is the real story of the Zodiac Killer. It was December 20th, 1968 when two young lovers parked their car on a secluded road in Northern California. The police were soon able to determine that the couple had been visiting a local drive-in theater before they disappeared. They had watched the Elvis Presley movie Clambake and then decided to go to an isolated area of the city to park and fool around a little bit. That's where the killer struck. He had followed the couple, perhaps for days, watching them and waiting for his opportunity to strike. It became clear that the killer had not only stalked the couple, but he had actually followed them home in the weeks leading up to the attack. This was a crucial piece of information because it led the police to believe that the killer had used a vehicle to escape. But despite this lead, the case went cold and the Zodiac Killer seemingly vanished into thin air. She was only 14 years old when she was brutally murdered. As with the previous case, the killer chose a secluded spot to carry out his attack. In this case, he lured Bales into an isolated area of Riverside using a fake name. They were parked in a secluded area when the killer approached their car and opened fire. Farron was killed instantly, but Mago survived. He also said that the killer was wearing a black leather jacket and a black hat. But despite this description, the police were unable to find the killer. He told her that he was a police officer and needed her assistance with a fake investigation. This time the victim was Paul Stein, a taxi driver who picked up a fare on the night of October 11, 1970. The killer requested to be taken to an isolated area of the city, and when they arrived, he pulled out a gun and shot Stein 5 times before escaping. Allen was a suspect in several other cases, and he had the perfect motive, having been fired from the police force for misconduct. However, despite the evidence, Allen was never charged with any of the Zodiac killings, and he died in 1992 without ever being caught. They continue to follow up on any new leads, and they are hopeful that one day they will catch the killer. Until then, the Zodiac Killer will remain one of the most notorious criminals in American history. But once she was in the secluded area, he attacked and stabbed her more than 20 times before fleeing the scene. Was he driven by anger or by a desire for fame? Or maybe something else entirely? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. While the case has never been officially solved, there are some who believe that they have uncovered the truth. In recent years, amateur sleuths have used forensic technology and investigative techniques to try to identify the killer. And while their efforts have not yet been successful, they have shed new light on the case and kept the public interested in the mystery. Post was a successful businessman and community leader who seemed to have the perfect alibi for the crimes. His brutality and his arrogance in the face of the law are truly chilling. But we can also be grateful that the police and investigators have worked tirelessly to bring him to justice. We've covered many other serial killers in great detail here, and we're sure you'll find something that interests you. Thanks for watching. Even though he may never be caught, their dedication has ensured that the memory of the victims will live on and that their stories will continue to be told. However, in 2021, a group of amateur sleuths came forward claiming to have solved the case. They presented their findings to the police, but so far, the Zodiac Killer still remains unidentified. The police were able to decipher the message and it read, "I hope you are enjoying the show. The Z may strike again." He had been watching them, waiting for his chance to strike. Some believe that he died many years ago, while others think he is still out there, living under a false identity. There are even rumors that the Zodiac Killer was actually a group of people working together. The Zodiac Killer would evade them for the rest of his life. And when he finally did, he chose a secluded spot to make sure that nobody could help the young lovers. And when he finally did, he was merciless. He shot David Faraday 4 times and Betty Lou Jensen 3 times before fleeing the scene. This is the signature of the painter. The killer was taunting the police, showing them that he was still out there and that he was not afraid. He had chosen his victims carefully, and he had studied their routines and habits. He knew where they would be and how to attack them without being seen. They were just enjoying some time together away from everyone else. The Zodiac Killer seemed to have evaporated, leaving behind nothing but questions. Then, in October 1969, he struck again, proving that he was still out there and still killing people. They had no idea that they were about to become part of a terrifying manhunt that would shock the entire country. Their names were David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen, and they would become the first victims of the infamous Zodiac Killer. Their bodies were found at around 7 a.m. by a passing motorist who immediately called the police. When officers arrived at the scene, they noticed that both Faraday and Jensen had been shot multiple times. And sadly, there was nothing they could do for them. Both of them were already dead. But the investigation was only just beginning. What made this case particularly disturbing was that the killer had left behind a cryptic note, a calling card that would become all too familiar over the next 2 years. The note simply read, "With compliments from the driver of the Black Zodiac." He even provided the return address for the letter, which turned out to be a vacant house. But the police didn't know that at the time. So they descended upon the address and conducted a massive manhunt, searching every inch of the property. They even brought in a helicopter and floodlights to make sure that nothing was missed. But it was all in vain. The killer was nowhere to be found. And that wasn't even the full extent of the killer's taunts. In the following weeks, he sent letters to various media outlets, including the San Francisco Chronicle, providing further details about the crime and boasting about his latest kill. As the investigation continued, more details emerged about the murders of Faraday and Jensen. But one witness would later come forward and claim to have seen a suspicious car near the crime scene. Over the next year, the police received several tips and leads, but none of them panned out. This time, his victim was a young woman named Sherry Jo Bates. Once again, the killer left behind a note, this time addressed to the police. It read, "This is the start of the artwork." But as the investigation continued, it became clear that the Zodiac Killer was not just a serial killer, he was also a meticulous planner. Then in May 1970, the killer struck again, this time targeting another young couple, Darlene Ferrin and Mike Mago. When the police interviewed Mago, he described the killer as a middle-aged white male, approximately 5 feet 10 inches tall with a heavy build. In fact, it would be almost a year before the Zodiac Killer struck again. Once again, the killer left behind a note, this time using the same cipher that he had used in his earlier letters to the media. But despite the killer's boasts, the police were unable to stop him. In the years since the last known attack in 1974, there have been many theories about the identity of the Zodiac Killer. One of the most popular theories is that the Zodiac Killer was a former police officer named Arthur Lee Allen. Another theory is that the Zodiac Killer was a prominent figure in society named Gary Francis Post. Even after all this time, the police have not given up the hunt. The Zodiac Killer's crimes shocked the nation, and his taunts and calling cards continue to fascinate people today. As we look back on the life and crimes of the Zodiac Killer, we are reminded of the evil that exists in our world. So what do you think? What was the Zodiac Killer's motive for killing these innocent people? If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more content.